Jamie Marich, PhD, is a Renaissance woman, a dancer, musician, performer, writer, recovery ambassador, clinical counselor, expressive arts therapist, and Reiki master teacher. Jamie travels internationally speaking while maintaining a private practice. She is the developer of Dancing Mindfulness, and her ultimate mission is to bring the art and joy of healing to others. Hi, and welcome to Magical Mindfulness, 21 days to a sparkling, joyful, and happier you. I'm your host, Jools Sinclair, author and creator of See the Beauty, a mindful gratitude program that helps people lead happier lives. And I am so excited today for our guest. She is just phenomenal, and she will be teaching us at the end of the session a little bit about mindful dancing, which I have been doing all morning in preparation. But before we start, let's go ahead and ground ourselves in today and give ourselves a little time to just inhale and be here, be present in this wonderful session. So first of all, I have my favorite beverage here, which is, again, peppermint tea, which I just think is lovely this time of the year. Tastes really good. Secondly, if you are following along, I've got it under all my notes. If you are following along with a journal, which I highly recommend, go ahead and grab it, because today's session, there'll be lots of wonderful little tips about mindfulness and meditation and a bunch of other things. So you'll want to definitely have your journal ready to write down some notes. And then finally, we're going to take 3 deep breaths together to help us be present. So go ahead and take a deep breath in as you close your eyes. Inhale deeply. Hold the breath at the top just for a moment. And exhale. On this next deep inhale, I want you to think of one thing that you are grateful for in this moment. And hold that at the top of the breath just for a moment. And then exhale. And then our last deep breath together for this session. Go ahead and inhale and congratulate yourself for being here, taking the time to learn something new, to have some time for yourself. And hold that at the top of the breath. And exhale. Hello, Jamie, and welcome to Magical Mindfulness.
Hi there, Jools. So nice to meet you, at least over the camera, and I'm very glad to be here.
I am so thrilled that you are here. I am such a fangirl of yours. I have been reading your website, I feel like nonstop, for months, and I'm so thrilled you're here, and thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for celebrating mindfulness in this way.
Thank you. Okay, so I thought maybe just the first question would be great if you could just talk a little bit about the work that you do, and also what you think maybe your own personal message is related to what you're doing.
So it's a great question. And I think if I had to summarize it all, I would say that I'm called to the work of facilitating transformative experiences for people. And that can come in the form of therapy, because I am a professional psychotherapist specializing in trauma. That can come when I teach courses, because I do teach a lot of other therapists how to work with trauma. And I really believe you have to have a personal experience to be able to teach it. And so even the clinical trainings I set up, I try to make sure that they're kind of deep dives into one's own stuff. And then I do quite a bit in the area of mindfulness and yoga with individuals who are not necessarily clinicians, expressive arts as well. But even there, it's a lot of that same spirit of calling people into these transformative experiences. And mindfulness really is the thread that runs through so much of my work. So, I mean, a lot of people know me as the creator of Dancing Mindfulness. So that's pretty obvious and pretty right there in the title, which is an expressive arts practice that both clinicians and non-clinicians can access. But I really define mindfulness kind of coming from one of the original Sanskrit definitions, which is this idea of coming back to awareness. And so it's any practice that continually calls us back home to this awareness. And that could be awareness of the present moment, awareness of who we truly are as beings, which is so much more than what mainstream society would have us believe. And so I think whatever I'm doing in whatever role that I'm serving, I'm using that practice of mindfulness, which is more than just a relaxation technique. I'm sure we'll get into that, really as the art of calling people home.
Oh, I just love that. Could you talk just a little bit about some of the people that you help in your practice? Like just, roughly who comes to see you at, in your practice and also in some of the things that you do?
Right. Well, at this point, I've been in private practice exclusively since about 2013. I was mostly in a private practice in a group setting since 2008. And then I worked in the field in other roles before that. But really throughout, the people who've come to see me are those who are interested in working with trauma, who understand that, or maybe are seeking to understand that unhealed trauma is a lot of what's keeping them blocked in their symptoms, or keeping them blocked in moving forward and realizing the intentions that they have set for life. So yeah, that's pretty much, because it's an interesting question, because so many different types of people come to see me and have come to see me over the years. But the one common thread is just this idea that unhealed wounds that have been unaddressed at earlier points in life have this tendency to keep us stuck. And in a way, I'm kind of like a plumber. That's a lot of my vocation, at least in my clinical work, is helping people to get themselves unstuck.
I love that. That's just a great metaphor, isn't it?
Thank you. I just kind of came up with it on the fly.
And it's like very vivid. I just love that. So can I ask you this? You use obviously creativity in your practice in the mindfulness. So can you talk about, and so many different modes of creativity. First of all, why? Because there must be a fantastic reason behind that. And secondly, do you find that helps, like kind of helping, different clients and patients?
Right.
Does that help, I guess, with the plumbing
metaphor? With the plumbing, yeah. It's a great question. And so professionally, I identify as an expressive arts therapist. And why that is significant is, by definition, the field of expressive arts therapy works with an all of the above when it comes to art forms and expressive and creative practices. Because it's likely your listeners have heard of practices like dance therapy, music therapy, art therapy, writing therapy, drama therapy, which are all fine forms. Yet, by definition, expressive arts works with an all of the above. We want to see how they interrelate. We may want to investigate how the expressive practices you may most resist have the most to teach you. And like I explain in my expressive arts and trauma book, Process Not Perfection, when you give people options of creative choices, it's like you're setting out a buffet of different creative outlets for folks, or expressive outlets for folks. And just a little sidebar, the word expressive tends to be a lot less intimidating for people than creative, because folks tend to think that to be creative, I have to produce something original. Whereas expressive kind of suggests, take the pressure off. We all have something to express, even if it's just a scream at the top of our lungs or some kind of gesture that we've been wanting to get out of us. So in working with people in that way, letting them know there are a bunch of different options. And I also find where it's very effective, especially working with unhealed trauma, is that unhealed trauma really gets stored in this brain, it's part of the brain, but it really kind of is its own separate and distinct brain that does not do well with words, that we can't easily access with words. Or some people have been able to put words to their traumatic experiences, but they haven't been able to connect to the feeling behind it. And that feeling is keeping them stuck, and feeling very rarely can be expressed with precise words and cognitions. So the expressive practices give people a mode to go out there, go out there. Right. And that's what I love about it. Obviously there's the poetic connections we can look at between just that we all have a birthright of expression that has long been stifled, whether that be by our traumatic experiences, by what the culture has told us. And getting people to connect with that in a safe and supportive environment is brilliant. But from a real technical perspective with the brain, expressive practices tend to involve actions, not words.
Right.
And that is often part of the plumbing that needs to be unclogged, is what's there below words.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's so interesting. I just love that. So what I love to, Jamie, some of the things I pulled off your website, which is kind of what you're talking about a little bit here. There is no one size fits all solution, which I absolutely love. And of course, come as you are is a big thing that I was finding on the dancing and everything. A lot of what you're saying is part of, it's your own expression. And it seems to me like you're providing a very safe environment for people to express themselves and kind of let that come out.
That's what I try to do. Because I do feel that if the biggest barrier people have to expressing is this fear of judgment. A funny story I can tell, that when I do a lot of expressive arts workshops and trainings, I often ask people which expressive practice tends to scare them the most. And I usually hear dancing. And folks will say things like, well, I can dance in front of my dog, or I can dance with my grandkids, but dancing in front of other people. And so I kind of go deeper and ask, well, what is it about your grandkids and the dog that makes it different than other people? And the immediate answer is, well, they're not going to judge me. They appreciate me just as I am. And so both with the workshops that I facilitate and the work that I facilitate, and in training others to share these practices as well, I always like them to know that and remember that if people can feel they're not going to be judged or criticized, but that they have this space created for them to explore, the connections are going to likely happen.
Oh, excellent. So Jamie, and I always love to ask this question, because I always find that people who have work, you know, that they're doing like this, that they're passionate about, and they're making a career out of things like this, usually have their own journey that takes them there. And if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit of your own journey, I read some of it on your website. How did you get to this point where you're helping people through creative expression and creative mindfulness?
I think the expressive arts practices were just naturally there for me throughout my childhood, as I dealt with a lot of stress and some trauma and just navigating the difficulties of life. I often say that I first tapped into the art of dancing mindfully when I was about 5 years old.
Wow.
And I was playing Mickey Mouse records in my basement. I had a Mickey Mouse record player. And I had this kind of great play space available in the basement. And I would go there at night when nobody would bother me, and I would just dance. And it was a beautiful practice for me to be able to deal with what life was bringing. And I grew up with quite a bit of arts in my life. I mean, I had dance lessons and singing lessons, and probably in junior high school, writing really took hold for me as an outlet. And yeah, I just think and then drama in high school was a big part of what I did. So having those abilities to express myself, I'm just grateful that I had the privilege of them being introduced to me, or that I was able to tap into them organically in a lot of cases, because I don't think I'd be here today if I didn't have that connection. So I got into the field of doing this professionally completely by accident. My background is actually not in psychology or counseling. I have a degree in history and English, with a specialty in pop culture. So I also did a lot with performing and creating through college.
I think I saw you with the guitar on one of your pictures,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, I've done a couple albums of music and have done the whole singer-songwriter thing. And this professionally happened by accident, because I was working in Bosnia from 2000 to 2003. My family's of Croatian background, and I was very keenly attuned to what was happening in the former Yugoslavia as that country disintegrated. And I had family and friends who were affected by the geopolitical conflict of it all. And so after my undergraduate was done, I went over there for 3 years to work. And I primarily served in civilian humanitarian aid as an English teacher. And even there, I recognized that working with music and dance and the arts was a much better way to teach English than just give people worksheets. And I had the good fortune of being mentored there by a very wise American social worker who helped me to understand that unhealed trauma was really at at fault for what was keeping a lot of people stuck and what was keeping things like motivation and concentration stifled in people that I was being asked to teach and instruct. And then she also mentored me in a lot of my own recovery, knowing that I needed to work on some stuff too, which I started that journey over there. So in 2003, she suggested that I do a graduate degree in counseling. She said, I think you're really going to like it after what you experienced over here. And sure enough, she was right. And so professionally, I've been involved as a counselor, working first in internship and through the different settings since 2004. And even from my first counseling internship, I always say I was blessed with a supervisor who was a little too burned out to care, and she didn't micromanage me, and I'm very grateful for that. And she said, well, you do all these expressive things, like you play guitar and you play music, and do that with the kids. And so she really gave me a blank check, and I'm grateful for that, to start exploring the use of a lot of these expressive and creative potentials in the counseling process. So I've done it since the beginning. And then it was in the year or so after that I formally got trained in EMDR therapy and a couple other specialty interventions for trauma. And then eventually yoga and meditation came more fully into my life. And I did my formal training in those paths, and then ended up developing Dancing Mindfulness. And it's just all blended together in a very beautiful fusion for me. And it's also helped me to continue working on my own self and transforming my own life. And for that, I'm grateful.
I just love that. And I always love seeing like the seeds of things.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Joseph Campbell has that thing where it's like, sometimes you're going along and nothing looks like it's making any sense, but then you get to a certain age and you look back and there's this whole path that's taken you exactly where you are.
Right.
So that I just love hearing that, like how did you get here? So that's just fantastic. Can we talk just a second about meditation? Because you mentioned, and I loved on your website, you say that there is not only one way to meditate. And I think that's so helpful to hear that. Do you have like more
so
thoughts
much
on that? I think you do, because I saw an interview.
So much I could say on that. I mean, first of all, the word meditation is so generic, because just about every global spiritual tradition has their own views on meditation. And when we talk about mindfulness, we do most likely credit it as a Buddhist practice, because Buddhist practices have been what have encouraged the talk and the growth around mindfulness. Yet one of the cool things I can offer is that my early meditation training actually came through a lot of ancient Christian paths. And there's a lot of common threads. I mean, the more I study different global faith traditions, different global meditation traditions, I realized just how much we have in common, not only spiritually, but really in this pursuit of returning to, some people would say returning to source, returning to our divine nature, returning to that thing we've lost connection from. And I truly believe anything that we do that helps us to reestablish that connection can be viewed as a meditative practice. And we so often think of, the sitting meditation, and there are people who swear by it as that's what helps connect them to source, and that's beautiful. But there are others of us who feel completely attuned to the moment, attuned to our experience when we're dancing. And some of us both.
I imagine too that like artists probably sometimes feel that way. I've interviewed some artists, and they talk about the mindfulness of it, and they're just so in that moment.
And I really think anything that helps you kind of stay in that zone where you're not resisting any urge to push what you're experiencing away. Because to me, when we're talking about mindlessness or this dissociative tendency that a lot of us have, because we're humans and society tends to promote it, it's this idea of pushing away. So when people ask me a lot about dancing mindfulness, a distinction I like to make is some people will say, well, I dance to escape. Which, if that's what you do, cool, at least you're dancing. But I would say meditative dance, especially dancing mindfulness, is really about dancing to be present. Dancing to be present with the fullness of what is, and not trying to push it away. Right. And we can do that when we paint. We can do that when we knit. Like in whatever practice we're engaged in, we can do that. And I know some people who are staying meditatively connected in a lot of those methods, but then still need to do the sitting practice because it's helping me consciously connect with this practice of just being. instead of doing. So I really think all paths are plausible. And I very much like to cite the work of one of my yoga teachers who I've studied with. When he's asked, you know, as an 87-year-old individual, how do you practice yoga today? He says, I practice yoga in every moment of every day and everything that I do. It's an opportunity to practice yoga. It's an opportunity to practice meditation. And I think these specific practices, of which I gave some examples of, are just that. They're ways to practice. And then life is the game. Life hurls these opportunities at you to put those practices into function, and realize that so much of our suffering is created by when we try to push away what is, instead of being able to roll with it, swim with it, breathe with it, however whatever metaphor most connects with you.
I just love that, because it just, to me, you're making meditation so accessible, because you're saying, again, come as you are. Again, everyone's different, basically. And then you can use these different techniques to get to the same place.
Yeah, and part of it's that buffet idea too, that we talk about in expressive arts. I really think the same thing applies in the study of yoga, meditation, and any other conscious practice.
So if somebody comes to you and says, I just can't do it, I can't meditate, it sounds like you have the answer.
Yes, and you probably tell from my facial, I get that a lot. And usually my answer is, well, how are you defining meditation? How are you conceptualizing meditation? And I feel that once we can address what some of their myths are, and then offer different options, everybody can meditate. I mean, meditation's our natural state, just like breathing's our natural state. And I typically find, and anybody who's watching this on the computer could probably do this now, if you go on Google Images and type mindfulness or meditation, that usually what comes back is some perfect looking person sitting on a beach somewhere underneath a tree in top of the line yoga clothes, and they're all blissed out doing this. And so if people look at that and think that is meditation, I don't think I'm that either. So if that's the kind of metric that I'm operating off of course I can't meditate. Or people say things like, you know, I'm not Zen, or I'm not calm, I can't chill. To which my answer is generally, neither am I. Neither am I. Some days I meditate and I'm like, you know, I will embrace with what, you know, I'll be with what is. And then even a lot of the marketing out there around mindfulness, it's so kind of promoted as this relaxation technique that'll help you chill out. And it may, yet it will also potentially help you work with embracing with what is. There was a beautiful picture a friend of mine took of me the other day where I'm holding this pillow of the poop emoji. If you're familiar with the poop emoji, and she has a.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, and I could send you the picture too if you want to use it at all.
That'd be good. That'd be good.
Yeah, and I'm just kind of like, you know, holding it, and to me, what that really represents is some days life will feel that way. Right. And if you can learn to embrace it and be with what is, eventually it's not going to feel that bad. Or you realize that so much of what causes stress is when you're actively in this relationship trying to like push that poop away, metaphorically speaking. I mean, I'm really getting into the, you know, plumbing metaphor on this interview.
This is good, Jamie.
Yeah, and so
it's good stuff.
And so I think the key is when people say they can't meditate is, can we help find a form for you that will help you be able to practice being with what is. And we can start small, because even if you look on YouTube or any other online method for teaching meditation, a lot of the meditations are very long, like 15 to 25 minutes, and which can be great if that's where you're at. But some people need to start really small, because being able to sit with your breath, or sit with discomfort, or sit with whatever is for that minute can be where practice begins. I mean, I know there's that cliche, the expert at everything was once a beginner. Right. And the same thing applies for meditation too. So that's just some of my feelings on it.
Well, I love it. And again, I just feel like it's so accessible how you are defining it. It just feels like, yeah, I can do that because I have
Yeah.
that problem too. I have a mind that just doesn't like to simmer down or calm down, but I really feel like I could dance with that mind.
Exactly.
And get
Yeah.
into the now moment.
Yeah.
Dancing to me, I think, is much easier.
And the key is, are you willing to set the intention that I will dance with what's coming up and not try to push it away? And then you may notice that after you spend this period of time dancing with it, then you are able to be still with it.
Right.
And a line that I say a lot in a lot of our work with Dancing Mindfulness is, can you notice the stillness after the movement? Can you be aware of just what's there in stillness? And often we need the movement to even bring that into our awareness.
Right. Jamie, what does a wellness practice look like to you? Would you recommend doing, for example, dancing mindfulness every day? Would you recommend some sort of meditation every day? What do you suggest to your
So I'd like to intone the wisdom of one of my favorite artists, Krishna Das, who's the great kirtan singer. And he has said in his teaching that the best practice for you is the one that you do.
I love that.
The best practice for you is the one that you do. And as a professional, I agree with that wholeheartedly, because I get the question quite a bit: how often should I be practicing meditation or yoga, or how often should I be doing these things, or what is daily? And I always say, do what you can commit to on a daily basis, even if it is 5 minutes a day, because we really are in the best position to rewire our brain and to cultivate these new positive habits when we do something consistently. So for me, it's not enough to kind of just say, oh, whatever, for 6 days and then go to one good yoga class one day a week. I mean, that may be a start. And so I don't want to put that down if that's where you're at right now.
I feel like those are never starts. Like, I feel like anything I've ever done where it's like once a week, it's like just sort of like I'm doing it for a different reason, and it never takes off.
Thanks for that testament to that, because I really believe it's what you do daily that gets you into it. So to that point, I have another toilet story I can tell you. So when I first got sober, this was over 17 years ago, I was living in Bosnia, and I told my mentor, the one who got me into all of this, I said, I'm not really like a morning person, because she had told me, because I did have a spiritual connection, and she had suggested that I pray first thing every morning. And something that I said to her was, I'm not a morning person. I'm lucky if I roll out of bed, maybe go to the bathroom and then take a shower. And she said, but you do use the bathroom every morning, right? And I said, yes. To which she responded, well, here's a little meditation reader. And she gave me one of kind of the classic 12-step books, right? That's like a daily meditation reader. And she said, put it on your toilet seat, because if you're going to use the bathroom, you have to pick up the book. And maybe when you're sitting there doing your stuff, then you'll be likely to pick up on that page and read it for that day. And sure enough, that started my daily practice, because it was something I was able to commit to every day. And she was very smart by encouraging me to put it in the path of something that I have to do every day.
Right.
And that's the piece of advice I give to a lot of people, use the toilet seat, because that's kind of the one common denominator, at least in the West, a lot of us would have. So, and almost 18 years later, I have to read something spiritual every morning. It's at my bedside now. I don't have to keep it on the toilet anymore. Right. But it's that idea that we can create these new grooves or these new habits, these new tendencies for ourselves. And we're more likely to do that with small steps on a day-to-day basis.
Yes. No, that makes sense. And I love that. I've written a couple books on gratitude, and I have a gratitude practice that I do every single day. And one of the things is I always want to set a morning intention, right, of looking for the beauty in the day. And I don't put it on the toilet seat, but I'll put it on the bathroom mirror to remind me. I'll put it on the nightstand to remind me, because it's very easy to, and you just kind of get caught up in things. Even 5 years later, I'll get caught up in things in the morning. So I still need those reminders once in a while. Sure.
And I tell people too that brushing your teeth can be a serious mindfulness practice that I still struggle with all these years later, because they recommend you brush your teeth 2 to 3 minutes in the morning. I really have to consciously commit to just brush my teeth, because I'm that type of person where I have the tendency to check my phone, pick out my clothes, get the next thing ready. And another very early recovery mentor of mine, who's also since passed away, would say that I learned to be present by just focusing on doing one thing at a time.
Right.
So into that logic, any human activity you do can be turned into your access point for beginning a meditative practice.
I think that's a great tip. All right, Jamie, what do you think? Can we dig into Dancing Mindfulness? Can we talk a little bit about this? I'm so excited about this.
We can. So yeah, what I'd like to share with your retreatants here is a practice that I often teach when I have like just a little short period of time to introduce people to Dancing Mindfulness. Because when Dancing Mindfulness is kind of working at its fullest potential, you can just play music and go. And so whatever your personal music may be, whatever your playlist may be, you can call some of that up and just go. And for those of you who already kind of have dancing in your bones, that may feel like, yeah, that's my kind of practice.
Right.
Especially if I can do that with this meditative intent of staying present and connected. But I do find that a lot of folks, when introduced to this idea of freestyle movement, can get a little locked up. Like, you want me to move my body freely. I have a body. I didn't know that. And so I like to offer some dances here, and if you're allergic to the word dance, you can just think of it as mindful movement that can at least help get you into the flow of it. This is a practice that I like to call embrace, release, embrace. And it speaks to a concept that I already talked about in the interview, which is mindfulness really at its heart is about embracing whatever life brings us, resisting this tendency we have to kind of push it away. And even if this teaching sounds a little scary, you don't have to buy it just yet, at least up here, but maybe try it with your body first and see if you may notice a connection. So if you think about coming into a gesture of embrace, you may close your eyes or leave them open. I know that I'm standing up, but you can also be sitting down too for this. Any dancing mindfulness practice can be done in a sitting or really a lying down position. So begin by just noticing the embrace. And maybe ask yourself, what am I being called to embrace today? Maybe it's a new opportunity. Maybe it's a challenge. Maybe it's a positive emotion, because sometimes those can be tricky too. So see if you can give yourself 3 or 4 full breaths into what you're being called to embrace. But then know, whenever you embrace, instead of pushing it away, maybe also notice what you're being called to release or let go of. And often your body, your mind, your spirit better knows what you need to let go of after you've first embraced it. So then from the release, I'll invite you to come back into another embrace. Taking a breath. And then coming into another release. And we'll try that a few more times, just at your own pace with your own breath. Maybe changing the crossing of the arms. Noticing your natural flow of embrace, release, and embrace. Give you about 1 minute more here, at least in this formal demonstration. And maybe your arms take on some different shapes. Maybe the releases call you into some variations on the movement. But know that whenever you release or let go of something, there may follow a call to embrace. Maybe even try dancing or moving or swaying with that embrace. And then release. And do this with a few more rounds of breath until it feels complete. And then coming back into a gentle standing position, closing the eyes or keeping them open in a soft gaze ahead of you. And notice what is right now. Notice the stillness after taking the movement. And I thank you for joining me for the practice.
Thank you, Jamie. That was wonderful. That was wonderful. It was just such a gentle, it was so gentle, and so it just felt like self-love almost. I mean, obviously you're doing the embracing, so that's probably why, but it just had such a warm, wonderful feeling. And I love the different movements. And I noticed too that the longer that we did it, I was able to kind of get more expressive, if you will.
Exactly. And just your experience reflecting on that speaks to why I love this practice so much, that a big part of self-love is embracing what is, and that can mean embracing yourself and where you are right now. Because one of my biggest deficits in self-compassion over the years has been feeling, well, I should be farther ahead. I ought to be over this already. I ought to have done this, that, or the other. It's like, no, just be with what is now, today. It's cool.
Yeah.
And then from there, you can explore the releases. And you're exactly right that when you start kind of with this core pattern of movement, you get into the flow with that, matching breath with that flow, and then you find your own varied forms of expression. So it's one of my favorite practices to teach for that purpose. And I'd encourage anybody who's listening, I know we just did the short sampler of it here on the interview, put on your own music later and maybe try this same idea in a more expanded form. And as we might say a lot in trauma-focused work, notice what you notice.
Right. When we put on our own music, do we just pick what feels right? I mean, should it be more of a gentle music, or
Great question. That's a great question. So a core teaching of mine is any music can be danced to mindfully. So I think with a practice like this, our natural choice might be something flowing and gentle. Right. Yet you can do the same general idea of embrace, release, embrace to rap or hip hop or.
I love it. I love it. I'm going to try Jack White. I'm going to do it.
Yeah, whatever may speak to you. And then if you really want to take this like a bonus round, a step forward, challenge yourself to do this practice with a genre of music you know you don't like.
Very, very cool. What a great idea.
That is how we practice being with what is.
Right.
That is how we practice distress tolerance, because life does not let you pick your playlist on a day-to-day basis.
That's a great metaphor too.
Life does not let you change the radio dial if you still listen to radio. It's been a minute for me. So I think these are the little training grounds I was discussing earlier. These little practices we can try that if we can do it on a very micro level, then we'll be better able to be with the bigger picture of whatever life brings us.
I just love that. And I do want to mention to our audience too, you have videos on YouTube.
Yes.
that I would highly recommend, just right after this session is done, look for the bubble dance, because I just love that one. I just love that one. And I think that's so fun. Can you just talk for a moment about that just briefly?
Yeah, of course. So to this point that, I can't meditate, we hear that a lot, that I can't dance. To which I might respond, yes. And can you chase bubbles though? Because if you think about bubbles, if you just get a set of bubbles that you blow and you kind of run through space chasing them with your hands, you're dancing. So we use the bubble dance as a way to kind of get people into the groove of moving through space, exploring space. So yeah, all the YouTube videos that you referenced are cataloged at either traumamadesimple.com or the main Dancing Mindfulness website, Dancing Mindfulness. If you look under videos or sample facilitations on either site, you can get basically anything I've done free of charge in the way of teaching and facilitating on YouTube. Or you can just search my YouTube channel, Jamie Marich, and you'll get a connection to all the different practices.
Yeah, it's just fantastic. Jamie, that is just wonderful. Before you go, because I know that you're super busy, can you just talk about the free gift that you're offering our audience?
Yes. So I am offering the first chapter from my newest book, Process Not Perfection, Expressive Art Solutions for Trauma Recovery. And Process Not Perfection is a book that I really did write for the general public to delve into expressive arts as healing, but it is done from my perspective as a trauma clinician to give you some insight into how expressive arts can really be aligned in your own recovery or self-study. So the first chapter is a process that we call grounding. Grounding is, of course, using a variety of experiences at your disposal to come into the here and now. So it really is a type of chapter / process that you can view as a mini retreat, particularly if you are willing to kind of go the full way with doing some of the I have a movement practice like this, I have an art practice, a writing practice, and yeah, you can get a little bit of a sample into the kind of work I do, and then if you like it, there's more to be had.
Oh, that's just fantastic. That's perfect. I am going immediately to download that chapter and read it and experience it too. And I'll be posting in Facebook just my different things that I'm doing regarding that. And maybe I'll post a bubble dance. I might do that, Jamie. I might.
Wonderful. And I know you have the online Facebook forum set up for the retreat. So yeah, if anybody wants to share practices from the chapter that they've delved into, that they feel good enough, share them. I would love it.
Or if they have questions, right? Because you're going to be popping now and again. I don't want to put in you.
Yeah.
I'm trying pressure on you, but
Facebook probably more than I need to be. So I'll be there.
Thank you so much, Jamie, for being here. It's just been a pleasure, and it's just been so educational, and it's just been a fantastic time talking with you. Thank you.
My pleasure, Jools. Best wishes.
Thank you.